Said it's good to see a full room. It's that's good. So we've been working our way through the Gospel of John. We've made it not quite halfway. We're at chapter 9 this morning. We could easily divide this up into 2 or 3 different lessons, but I'm going to try to do the whole thing all in one shot, because I think it might be helpful just to see this story, because it's one story start to finish, the whole chapter. So we're going to try that. I normally have about 80 slides, and this morning I've got 100, so we'll see. I don't know. May not make it. But anyway, so I just wanted to start by showing you this is where we ended last time, and because their connection, and I want you to see that connection. It says, your father Abraham rejoiced that he would see my day. He saw it and was glad. So the Jews said to him, you are not yet 50 years old and have seen Abraham? Jesus said to them, truly, truly, I say to you, before Abraham was, I am. That was kind of the climax of last chapter. So they picked up stones to throw at him. So now they're trying to kill him. But Jesus hid himself and went out of the temple. The next line is, as he passed by. So that's where we're starting, but that's very directly connected to, they're in hot pursuit with rocks. But as he passes by this blind man, he stops and ministers to the blind man. I just thought, that's Jesus, right? They're chasing him around with rocks, and he's like, oh, hold on a minute, and deals with this man who's been born blind. So just something to observe there. As he passed by, he saw a man blind from birth. Now, obviously, you don't know that by seeing the man. That's added to the text for our benefit. So I wanted to have this in your mind. What's the significance of telling us he was blind from birth? What's the point? And I won't give you that till almost the end, but I do want you to have that question in your mind. Obviously that's a significant thing, or it would just said, as he was passing by, there was a blind man, right? So the blind from birth is significant, and we want to make sure to figure out why is that there. His disciples asked him, Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind? Now, it may be that this man obviously has been there for a long time, and everyone, he was kind of, famous. There's a gentleman here in town, I don't know who he is, but I've seen him walking along the road. You may know who I'm talking about. He's got long hair, real thin guy. Don't know his name. But half the people in Fort Wayne know who I'm talking about, because he's been walking down Coliseum Boulevard and all over town for 30, 40 years, right? So he's pretty famous around Fort Wayne. This may be that. Maybe he's kind of famous in the area. They know him, and that's how the disciples know he was born blind. Not sure exactly how they know that. My question is, what's wrong with their question? Right? Their question, who sinned, this man or his parents? Do you see they start with the assumption, he's blind, sin. Now the question is only, whose sin? Obviously their sin, because he wouldn't be blind if he hadn't sinned, or if his parents sinned, or somebody had to sin, right? Is that not the assumption? It assumes that suffering is because of sin. That's the assumption. And they're so confident that it doesn't even cross their mind to ask, is he blind because of sin? No, of course that's true. So that's their starting assumption. So let me address that. All suffering is the result of the fall and sin in that way, but not all personal suffering is the result of that person's sin. Hugely important. Just if you're going through a difficult time, challenging, like over and over and over and over, it's common that people will start to think, my goodness, what in the world have you been doing? You know? Why? Because we think the way they think in many ways. Is it possible that someone's going through a challenging time because they keep making bad decisions? Sure, that's possible. Consequences of bad decisions. But we almost have a mindset that, you know, if somebody gets cancer, we don't assume they were committing adultery last month, right? I mean, we're not that directly connecting those things, but we do still have this underlying idea that someone's suffering is probably, maybe would be the word to use, connected to something they've done wrong. And I want you to kind of see why that's a flawed way of thinking. I'm not going to read all this. It's here just to remind me. It's Job. Everybody's familiar. Verse 8, there toward the middle. And the Lord said to Satan, have you considered my servant Job, that there is none like him on the earth, a blameless, upright man who fears God and turns away from evil? That's a pretty strong statement on God's part, the only one that would actually know if that's true. He's stating it. This Job is actually a righteous and upright man. That's pretty good endorsement coming from God. So if their thinking was correct, of course, Job would have an incredible life with no flaws and no problems and no challenges because he's, according to God, righteous and upright. Verse 10, have you put a hedge around him and his house and all that he has on every side? You have blessed the works of his hand, and his possessions have increased in the land. Now, part of that is because when you live according to God's law, life will go well, right? Whether you're saved or not, don't commit adultery, your marriage will be better than if you do, right? I mean, work hard and you will do well at your job. You know, there's a principle here where if he's living righteously, his life will be better. But stretch out your hand and touch him and all that he has, and he will curse you to your face. And the Lord said to Satan, behold, all that he has is in your hand. Only against him do not stretch out your hand. And Satan went out from the presence of the Lord. So why does Job have problems? Because God used Job as an object lesson for us of how durable, how resilient, how unflappable God-given faith is. That's the point of the story. When God empowers faith, you can't break it. You will finish well if you're genuinely saved, because the faith you have is not of your own doing. God's the one doing that. And the whole book of Job is to help us understand that. So God sends calamity upon Job in ways that just are unimaginable. Because if it's just a little trial, you don't make the point. So what an incredible thing for us to be able to see. Poor Job, right? But yet, not poor Job. What an incredible opportunity he had to give glory to God in the way that he suffered through that. Go ahead.
Our misunderstanding is that God's love, so he couldn't allow that to happen.
Yeah.
But he did allow it.
Yeah.
You can't say God did it,
No.
but he allowed Satan to do it.
Yes, and there is that allow and did. So God did not kill his children,
Right.
but his children are dead because God sent Satan to go do that. So you don't want to say, God was like, okay, let's see how this goes, right? There is a sovereignty about what God's doing, but God's not sending in the Midianites to steal the donkeys. So we'll see some of that more this morning as we go through. Next thing I want you to see is this. Righteous are you, O Lord, when I complain to you, yet I will plead my case before you. Why does the way of the wicked prosper? Why do all who are treacherous thrive? That is a common theme in Scripture. You'll see that kind of question. Why is that a question? Because that is the air we breathe. That's the world we live in. The unrighteous prosper. The wicked prosper. It's just, bank robbers are rich, I mean, it's like drug lords and the cartels have more money than most states, right? I mean, they have trillions at their disposal because they're awful people and they kill people that get in their way and they live lives of wealth and opulence. Does that mean it's a good idea? No, because their end is incredibly bad, right? But that is the world we live in. The wicked do prosper. The wicked prosper and the righteous suffer. So when you see someone who is suffering, you can't say, oh, look how righteous they are. That's also not appropriate. But the point is, we want to just be careful not to assume judgment or discipline on someone we see that's going through a challenging time. It may be that, and they're the only ones that would know, right? So if you are going through suffering or challenge, it is always appropriate to, Lord, search me and know me, show me the wickedness of my ways, have that conversation with God, and then act accordingly. Why did they think people suffering was the result of sin? Why would they have thought that? This is quick. This was taught by the Pharisees, and some of the stuff I was listening to this week, it's pretty remarkable how, they really taught this. This was like a huge deal in their theology. And part of that was because they misinterpreted Exodus 20, verse 5. What do you mean? Oh, sorry, I got that. I don't have it in here. I must have accidentally copied over. Oh no, wait, here it is. Sorry. You shall make for yourself no carved image or a likeness of anything in the heavens above or the earth beneath or that is within the water. So the point here is don't make a carved image. Don't make idols. It's like the second commandment. You shall not bow down to them or serve them. For I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God, visiting the iniquity of the fathers on the children to the third and fourth generation of those who hate me. So does that sound like if your parents sin, 3 and 4 generations later, there's still punishment, right? Doesn't that sound like, hey, who sinned, this man or his parents, right? That's not what that's saying. What that's saying is when a generation of people are acting evil, it becomes the culture, and the culture will suffer the consequences of that. And it can take generations to fix that. You don't just change a culture like that. So when you have a culture that is steeped in some evil, the kids just inherit that, and their kids inherit that, and it takes a mass of that group of people shifting. And it can take generations to shift away from that. So they're suffering consequences of the collective group of people behaving badly. Then that just flows on through the generations. You've heard of, say, third generational firemen or third generation welfare, right? People tend to follow in the footsteps of their parents. So that's what that's talking about. That's more of a principle. But here's an Ezekiel passage, Ezekiel 18. This is really good at helping dispel this idea. And he starts this with God saying to Ezekiel, "What do you mean by repeating this proverb concerning the land of Israel? The father has eaten sour grapes, and the children's teeth are set on edge." It's a proverb that's like, when the dad does bad, kids suffer. That's what that's saying. But then God says, "As I live, declares the Lord, this proverb shall no more be used by you in Israel." Stop saying that, is what he's saying. Quit doing that. You're setting this wrong in their mind. Don't do that, Ezekiel. If you go down to the end of the chapter, or toward the end of the chapter in verse 20, he says this, "The soul who sins shall die. The son shall not suffer for the iniquity of the father, nor the father suffer for the iniquity of the son." Very clear, just explicit. That's not how that works. The righteousness of the righteous shall be upon himself, and the wickedness of the wicked shall be upon himself. So explicitly, kids don't suffer a punishment from God because their parents were evil. They may suffer consequences of that behavior. If your dad's a bank robber and you end up in foster care because your dad's in prison, that's a consequence. But that's not God punishing you because your dad was sinful, right? So, with that said, so why was he born blind? It's not because of the sin, right? We've just established that. And his disciples asked him, "Who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind?" Jesus answered, "It was not that this man sinned or his parents, but that the works of God might be displayed in him." His middle name is Job. It's like, wait, what? He was born blind so that the works of God might be displayed in him? I don't know. I mean, if that hits you as hard as it hits me, but that's pretty remarkable. This young boy is suffering with blindness, who then becomes a young man, and I don't know what his age is at this point. He's lived for 20, 30, 40 years blind. Clearly, as you think through this, he's a beggar. Okay, that's a very difficult life. We'll find out later he has parents. Why are you a beggar when you have family? Because your family doesn't want you around, right? Otherwise, you'd be in their house. They'd be providing for you. This man has suffered in ways that are just unimaginable his whole life, so that the works of God might be displayed in him. We'll see that unfold. Why? So Jesus could heal him and demonstrate that he was God. What a opportunity, what a blessing to this man who becomes saved. You chose me to display your glory, God, right? That's what he's probably thinking once he's saved. But what an incredible challenge he was put through so that God could get glory. That's an amazing thing. I had a hand somewhere. Oh, yeah.
I just wondered, what about other people who were born blind from birth? Could that be Jesus' statement for them too? Because it's still an unanswered question until Jesus answers it, and he says, this is to display God's glory. Well, can that apply to a person born 100 or 1,000 years later?
Yeah. I would say this one is specific to this man because of this very specific healing that Jesus does, and we'll see in a bit why that's so significant. But so if a person is born blind in West Africa and they live their life and they die that way, I don't know that brings God glory. right? So why would they have been born blind? The fall, for the same reason people get cancer and have, cleft palates and all kinds of other maladies. It's the fall would be the ultimate reason for that. One last thing, and then I'll come to you. I heard this statistic, and this was an old statistic, so it's not maybe true now, I don't know. 90% of people born blind at a certain time, this was in the 1990s or whenever the stat was from, was because of a venereal disease of the mom. They would have a disease, and as the baby's being born, it would have that, like gonorrhea, and that would destroy the eyes. So, is it the child's sin or the mom's sin? Well, it may not be the mom's sin either, because she may have that because of some other, whatever. Maybe her husband was behaving badly, and then she got a disease, and now their child is blind. So the point is, there are reasons like that, and in America, if that were to happen, we have treatments for it. Some places they don't have those kind of treatments. So there is things like that could cause someone to be born blind, but that doesn't even there connect to sin. You know what I mean? Because maybe the mom hasn't sinned, and certainly the child hasn't sinned. So anyway, go ahead.
Well, I was thinking about people with Down syndrome. I worked with many who had Down syndrome in my career, and in many parts of the world, they say 95% of those people are aborted. There's a lot of us in this country, like think of Chi-Chi's Playhouse down the road. They have the true perspective that people that come into the world with Down syndrome have much to offer. They're a great, great blessing to their families, and that they don't even at times even look at them as defective. They just say, no, they're born, God's using them for a purpose. So it's a totally different
mindset. I think that would be a result of the Christian influence in America over the years. It's becoming obviously less influential, but now there are, you can do tests to determine, and that way, so you can have your abortion if you, you know what I mean? That was unheard of, and now it's become a thing in America. So we're probably drifting more along the lines of these other countries that have not been influenced by Christian theology. We must work the works of him who sent me while it is day. Notice he doesn't say I, he says we. So he's including them in that. And that is, must do these things that God has called me to do. We must be active at doing those while it's day. Day is simply while there is opportunity to do the work before, the end of the age. Night is coming when no one can work, meaning it's over, it's done. Now we're at the end, and now it's everything we could do is finished. Is kind of what he's saying there. As long as I am in the world, I am the light of the world. So while he's there, he can expose the world to the truth. Once he's gone, it's not night, because their work will continue, but he's the light of the world, and then they will take that light they've been exposed to and take it into the New Testament and in Acts and all the different gospel, the letters of Paul, and so they'll continue on with this work, and that's the we part of that we must work. Having said these things, he spit on the ground and made mud of the saliva. Then he anointed the man's eyes with mud and said to him, go and wash in the pool of Siloam, which means sent. So it's a funny part of this one message. He reads all these different commentary things of why he did it this way, why he mixed saliva and dirt, and it was like to demonstrate the healing properties of saliva and just all kinds of goofy stuff. And then he said, so why did he do it this way? I have no idea. Why? Because the Bible doesn't tell us. We don't know why Jesus decided to do it this way is the point. He did, but we don't know why.
Maybe it's just because it was a miracle.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah.
everybody gets, oh, well,
Yeah.
it could be this, or, well,
Yeah.
sorry, dirt
Wait
stir
a
gets it.
minute.
Yeah.
All moms know spit cleans things too.
You know that.
Was interesting.
There wasn't water nearby.
Well, but I mean, he could have literally just said "see," right? And that would have been it. So there is two pieces of information that are interesting. One is it was against rabbinic law, not against God's law, against rabbinic law, to apply saliva on the Sabbath because it was thought to have healing properties and you were not allowed to medicinally heal anyone on the Sabbath. And Jesus flouts every rabbinic law. He knows all of them, and he just, every time he sees one, he breaks it. Because that's not breaking God's law. It's like you guys have these goofy, stupid laws that you've just made up out of nothing. And I'm going to break every one of them because they're wrong. He's just crushing their religious systems. I think that might be why. The other one would be when he healed the man who had been lame for many years. Get up, take up your bed and walk. He's giving the man something he can respond in faith with. He's doing the same thing here. The man's blind. He's putting stuff on his eyes. Now, go, wash. Okay. Or he could say, I ain't doing that. He could just not, right? But his responding in faith, and he can see. So there may be that. He's giving the man a mechanism to demonstrate his faith. So he went and washed and came back seeing. The neighbors and those who had seen him before as a beggar were saying, "Is this not the man who used to sit and beg?" Some said, "It is he." Others said, "No, but he is like him." He kept saying, "It's me. That's me. I'm the one." It's just funny to me that there are all these people arguing, and he's literally standing like, "Hey, I'm standing right here. Yes, it's me." You don't have to wonder.
Can't you see me?
Yeah, it's just kind of a funny line.
Could that be part of it too, with his parents not taking care of him? Everybody else had seen him.
Yes.
And they knew him.
Yeah.
If
Yeah.
he was taken care of at home, they wouldn't have
Yeah.
known anything.
One thing about my dig on the parents, you'll get more of why that's relevant later, but it's I don't know, these parents. Okay, so they said to him, then how were your eyes open? Okay, so if you were him, so how have your eyes become open? He answered, "The man called Jesus made mud and anointed my eyes and said to me, 'Go to Shalom and wash.' So I went and washed and received my sight." That doesn't really tell you how he was made able to see, right? I mean, it tells you this is what happened, but doing that wouldn't open your eyes. Washing the mud off your eyes would not heal you. So all he can say is, well, this is what happened, and there it is. But it is, and it's just very straightforward, just a clear telling of the story. He does accredit this to Jesus. How exactly he knew it was Jesus, we don't know, because obviously he's blind, so we're not sure how he knows that. They said to him, "Where is he?" And he said, "I don't know." Again, he walked off, and I'm blind. I have no idea where he went, right? I mean, by the time I could see, he wasn't around. They brought to the Pharisees the man who had been formerly blind. Now it was the Sabbath day when Jesus had made the mud and opened his eyes. So again, saliva, Sabbath, breaking the Sabbath, their Sabbath, not God's Sabbath. So the Pharisees again asked him how he had received his sight. And he said to them, "He put mud on my eyes, and I washed, and I see." A simplified version of the story, right? But just very straightforward. He put mud on my eyes, I washed them, and now I can see. Some of the Pharisees said, "This man is not from God, for he does not keep the Sabbath." So they haven't really started doing their investigation yet. They've just been brought in, and the man gives this very brief account of the story, and immediately, this man is not from God. They've reached their judgment before the trial starts, is what is happening here. But what's interesting is that is indicative of how unbelief will work. Unbelief starts with its answer, and no matter where the investigation goes, it comes to its answer. And that's what you'll see here with these guys. So they start with, well, he isn't from God because he's not keeping our rules. And obviously, we're from God, so if he doesn't agree with us, then clearly he can't be from God. I mean, it's this weird logic but my point is, in bringing that up, this is not necessarily spiritual, what we're seeing here. There is a spiritual blindness that they have and all of that, but this is how the world works. People start with their premise, and they get to the other end, and they somehow find a way of fortifying their own premise. That is just as common as air. But others said, "How can a man who is a sinner do such signs?" And there was a division among them. So this is among the Pharisees. Some of the Pharisees were saying he can't be from God, he doesn't keep the Sabbath, and other Pharisees were saying, "Oh, wait a minute, how if he's a sinner, he's not from God, how can he do such amazing things?" Right? So they said again to the blind man, "What do you say about him, since he opened your eyes?" He said he is a prophet. So he doesn't claim him to be God or the Messiah. He's clearly from God because he's done this incredible thing, right? The Jews did not believe that he had been blind and had received his sight. Now, why don't they believe that?
They don't want the answer.
Why didn't they believe the man was blind? Why wouldn't, there's all these witnesses that are, yeah, that was him. They
How
don't
many
believe
times
him.
have we said, well, I'm not gonna give money to that guy on the street because he probably got more than I got?
Well, or something, yeah, right?
We theorize it and
Yes.
generalize it.
We always find a way.
Yeah.
Because their hearts were hardened by pride. That would be a answer to that question. This is the spiritual answer to the question. And I want you to see both sides of this. This is in next chapter. We'll see this more in depth later. So the Jews gathered around him and said to him, "How long will you keep us in suspense? If you are the Christ, tell us plainly." Jesus answered them, "I told you, and you do not believe. The works that I do in my Father's name bear witness about me." That the works tell you who I am. You can't do what I'm doing if I'm not from God, right? That's what he's saying. But you do not believe because you are not among my sheep. That's the answer. So what does that mean? Well, I'll tell you in detail later when we get to chapter 10. But when we talk about someone being written in the Lamb's Book of Life before the foundation of the world, or we talk about the elect, or we talk, that kind of thing, this is that, and that's sheep. In other words, you don't believe and become a sheep. You are a sheep, and therefore you believe, is what this is saying. Now, if that's new news to you, you may be going, "No, wait a minute." But when you read this sentence, that is exactly what this sentence is saying. You do not believe because you are not among my sheep. Who believed? Sheep believe. If you're not sheep, you don't believe. That's very clearly what he's saying here, right? My sheep hear my voice. So if you're not a sheep, you don't hear his voice, right? Yes, that's yes. That's what's happening with these guys. They are spiritually blind to the truth. They're not sheep. They can't hear the truth. They can't see the truth.
Is it because he, after gaining his sight, things he had never ever seen in his life, he wasn't, well, like a blind person would probably stumble, or like maybe his vision
No.
wasn't clear?
No, when he got his sight, I'm convinced he had the best sight of any person around. He had God doesn't make faulty eyes when he
Right.
makes new eyes. So
So it was instantaneous.
instantaneous and perfect. Yeah, yeah. So the point I'm getting at is here, they don't believe that he was born blind because their hearts are hardened by pride and because they're not his sheep. That is two different things. They're both true. One is spiritual, one is not spiritual. Meaning that first line could be said of a political debate, right? That has nothing to do with spiritual. That's just, you know that Chevys are better than Fords, and regardless of whatever evidence you come up with to prove the other, Chevys are still better, right? The Republicans are awful because, of course they are. The Democrats are evil, but you know what I'm saying? You start with a premise, and your pride will prevent you, no matter what the evidence is, from shifting your position. What's the antidote? The truth will set you free, as we talked about last week. You have to be willing to say, I could be wrong. Because that's absolutely true of every human being that's ever been, right? You have to be willing to get there. They can't get there because of their pride. Separately, in this specific case, related to spiritual issues of the divinity of Jesus, that is, the sheep hear my voice. They are not sheep. They are not going to see him to be the Messiah. So there's two things, and I just want you to see both. The Jews did not believe that he had been blind and had his sight until they called the parents of the man who had received his sight and asked them. We want to hear it directly from the mom and dad, not your neighbors and stuff that have been seeing you by the gate for 30 years. We want to know, was he really born blind from his parents? They said to them, is this your son whom you say was born blind? How then does he now see? Right? Just a pretty straightforward question. Is this really your son? Was he really born blind? And how does he see? 3 questions. His parents answered, we know that this is our son and that he was born blind. Real quick, they just, yep, that's him. It really is him. And yes, he really was born blind.
Why, they didn't believe Jesus? Or, I don't understand.
The Pharisees do not believe Jesus. Period. Everything he comes out of his mouth, they reject it no matter what the evidence is. This kind of willful blindness is it's always associated with pride, but it's also often what's the word I'm looking for? Irrational. It makes no sense that you could, like the one person said earlier, but wait a minute, if the man is a sinner, how could he do these incredible signs, right? That's logical. He just made a man born blind see. How in the world could you do that if you're not from God? Irrationally, no, it can't be that. He doesn't agree with me.
So I thought that he was lying?
Yes, the Pharisees always assume Jesus is lying.
Bad people.
His parents said, gives the answer, but how he now sees, we do not know. Now, they do know because they've talked to their son, and their son is telling them how it happened. Right? I mean, this is not news to them. They know what happened. But we don't know. That's lying. This is the second strike against these folks. They've let their son become a beggar. Now they're denying the truth. We don't know how he got his sight. Nor do we know who opened his eyes. That's a problem, because they know. Ask him. He is of age. He will speak for himself. Let's throw him under the bus on the way out of the room. We're going to get in trouble. I don't want to get in trouble, so you go after him. This is, you've been accused of a crime that you didn't commit, and you're going before a trial, and your parents are asked to give character witness and they say, man, I don't know. You just have to, yeah, you should talk to him. I got nothing to say here.
Get a life.
These are not good people. I'm kind of upset with them as I go through this. Go ahead.
Yeah, so just a little comment about the parents and the way that I was seeing this is they, removed him from the house when he was a beggar, because if they were to house him and take care of him, then that may be a confession that his blindness was their sin versus his own sin. Therefore, if he's sinful and is blind because of his own sin, then we don't want anything to do with him.
Yes. Also, he would have been seen as an outcast or like an unclean, like a leper type thing. So if he's in the house, now we are, and we can't go, we can't participate in all the things that God, the community, and it's like being shunned by the Amish kind of a thing, right? So here's why I'm not just jumping to conclusions about the parents, because we're explicitly told his parents said these things because they feared the Jews. For the Jews had already agreed that if anyone should confess Jesus to be the Christ, he should be put out of the synagogue. There were 3 ways you could be put out of the synagogue. One was like for a week as a discipline. One was for months, maybe a longer period of time. And then the last one would be forever. And this really is just the ultimate, you are an outcast. You're Jewish, so the Romans don't like you, and now the Jews will have nothing to do with you. This is a very, very tough spot. It's the man born blind has been there already, and the parents don't want that for themselves. So their love for acceptance amongst the community is stronger than their love for their son. That is not uncommon, sadly, but it's just still upsetting when you see that unfold. Therefore his parents said, he is of age, ask him. So for the second time they called the man who had been blind and said to him, this is amazing, give glory to God. We know this man is a sinner. This is emotional manipulation. This is, you don't want to side against God, do you? I mentioned it last week. There was something posted by a friend of ours on Facebook, and I was saying it was incredibly emotionally manipulative. When I read this, that snapped back. That's what this is. They're trying to, it's like, the whole Nazi word that we throw around in politics today, right? You don't want to be like the Nazis and support blah, blah, blah. Really? You know what I mean? That's kind of this, only on the other direction. Give glory to God. Do the right thing, man. Tell us the truth. Come on, we know he's not from God. He answered, whether he is a sinner, I do not know. One thing I do know, that though I was blind, now I see. So they know the man is a sinner. And he says, well, I don't know if he's a sinner, but the one thing I do know is that I was blind and now I see. That I know.
You got it back on topic.
Yes, yeah. They said to him, what did he do to you to open your eyes? So why do they want to hear from him again? They've already asked him. He's already told them. And here they go. Well, all right, well, tell us again. How did this happen? Because they are hoping for a different answer. They're hoping to find some flaw, that they will not believe the truth. And so they are doing everything they can to come up with a way of working around the obvious reality. They are unwilling to hear the truth because it does not fit what they want to hear. That's the bottom line. They don't want to believe. So when we've talked in the past about God's sovereignty and man's responsibility, this is their They are responsible for this. They do not want to believe the truth, and it is why they don't believe. Also, there's the sheep thing where they're not the sheep, but this is very willful on their part. I'm reminded of Moses and Pharaoh, and it says Pharaoh hardened his heart. And then after the second one, Pharaoh hardened his heart. And then after the third one, Pharaoh hardened his heart. And somewhere around 4, 5, 6, can't remember, and God hardened Pharaoh's heart. Why? Because at some point, even idiots figure it out. You know what I mean? It's like, wait a minute. Okay, I give up. No. You've locked in now. You're following this all the way to the end at this point. So there comes a point when God hardens the heart of that person and solidifies them in that state of rejection. And this seems to very much have happened already with these guys. At least most. I mean, we know Nicodemus becomes a follower, and he would have been here and involved.
You know,
Go ahead.
it just seems like this is just another thing that Jesus is doing that's eroding their power and influence. And I think a lot of their response also has to do with, we're on the downward trend now.
Yeah, what will people do to protect their own power? They'll kill God if have to. Yeah. I've told it before, but by the end, they know for certain he's really the Son of God, and then they kill him anyway because he's threatening their power. Again, is that as common as the air we breathe? Absolutely. Every government structure, every system of power there is, when it's threatened, it will attack that which is attacking it. So when he is asked, so what did he do again now? He answered them, I have told you already, and you would not listen. Why do you want to hear it again? Now he's starting to get a little snarky, which I appreciate. I do think that's important. It's not just snarky. It's not just being, he's not just being a jerk here. There is a confidence that you see in this man. What is he confident in? He doesn't really know who Jesus is fully yet. He certainly doesn't know he's God. What he knows is that I've been blind my entire life. I've never seen anything. And I'm seeing really clearly, and it's because of him. There's no way you'll convince him that didn't happen, because it did, right? The confidence that comes with that, absolutely, I know the truth, leads to things like this, as opposed to the parents, I don't know. And he's like, I do know. You people are nuts.
Is it because they don't want to change their opinion of him as a man?
Yes.
Or they thought he was down,
Jesus, the Pharisees thought Jesus was just a man.
No, I mean the blind man. They didn't want to change their opinion of him as a beggar and...
No. It's because the blind man is confessing Jesus as truly from God, and they will not have that. It can't be from God because he disagrees with us. That's their problem. All right, let me keep going here. Then he throws a little salt in the wound here. Do you also want to become his disciples? Again, I just like the courage of this man.
When you've seen God the way he has, you got courage.
Yeah, the other thing is adversity, which this man has experienced his entire life, builds that kind of strength, right? Yeah. And they reviled him, mocked, that kind of thing. So debates will often start as just like an intellectual back and forth. And then when the facts aren't what that other person wants them to be, they will often then get nasty, or they start attacking the messenger, kind of a thing, right? They're gonna be insulting. That's what you see here. They reviled him, saying, let me show you this first, and then I'll show you what they're saying. Proud people who are confronted with the truth, usually attack the messenger. That's the key. This idea that I've just said, that is at the heart of persecution. Persecution is a pushback against truth being exposed to someone who doesn't want to believe the truth. And again, that's not isolated to spiritual things, but here's, have you ever heard I know you have, the expression, we never talk about, politics, religion, and it seems like there's a third one, I don't remember what it is, sports teams, no, it's not that one. You know what I'm saying? There's like three things we never talk about: religion, politics, and something. I don't remember what it was. Why? Because you can debate sports teams. Why? Because that's not really important. Do you know what I mean? It is, but it's not as important as like the fate of the nation or where you're going to spend eternity. Those are really of significance. They're also deeply personal, right? So I'm not going to get into a debate with you about something that you hold so tightly that would ruin that relationship. So that's why people say that. And so the point I'm getting at is the more important it is, the more this is true. And that's why I'm kind of making that analogy between politics and faith. One is spiritually driven and the other is not. One is just pure pride. The other one has that same element, but it also has the spiritual component of being, there's a spiritual blindness that's added to what's already there with pride. John 5, I wanted you to see this, just kind of an amazing contrast. When Jesus saw the man at the pool of Bethesda, he was laying there and he had already been there a long time. Jesus said to him, "Get up, take up your bed and walk." And at once the man took up his bed and walked. Later in the story, they asked him, "Who is the man who said to you, 'Take up your bed and walk'?" Now the man who had been healed did not know who it was, for Jesus had withdrawn. So this guy doesn't know. He's being asked. He doesn't know. Afterwards, Jesus found him at the temple and said to him, "See, you are well. Sin no more, that nothing worse may happen to you." What you're going to see here in a moment is the same kind of interaction happens with the second man, too. This man born blind. He finds him later. So in both cases, there's a quick healing and Jesus slips away. They're both confronted by the Pharisees. They both have this interaction with the Pharisees. What I want you to see is this man, the man went away and told the Jews that it was Jesus who had healed him. So see the contrast. The one guy is bold and he's just in their face. "Oh, you want to be his disciple too?" And this guy's like, "Hey, it was Jesus." He's turning him in. What an incredible difference between these two men and the way they respond to that. So back to just that. So they reviled him, saying, "You are his disciple, but we are disciples of Moses." So we know that God has spoken to Moses, but as for this man, we do not know where he comes from. Why don't they know where he's come from? Is it lack of evidence? Nope. They have all that they need. It's that he doesn't agree with them. So he can't be from God because he doesn't agree with me and I'm a genius. And it's that kind of just attitude that's incredible. The man answered, Why? This is an amazing thing." His snarkiness goes up on the volume a bit here. "You do not know where he comes from, and yet he opened my eyes. We know that God does not listen to sinners, but if anyone is a worshiper of God and does his will, God listens to him. Never since the beginning or the world began has it been heard that anyone opened the eyes of a man born blind." Answer to the first question. Why are we told that he was born blind? Because since the beginning of the world, no one had ever opened the eyes of someone who was born blind. This is a miracle unprecedented. So is the feeding of the 5,000 and several others, but this is incredible. It's just an absolutely massive miracle that they can know for certain it really did happen, and yet, despite that, all that evidence, they refuse to believe the truth. If this man were not from God, he could do nothing. They answered him, "You were born in utter sin, and that you would teach us," and they cast him out. Their vitriol, their hatred, their debate has gone physical now. Now they are just scorning him. "You were born in utter sin," and just ripping him apart verbally, and they literally physically throw him out. That's the way people lose arguments, right? It's what it looks like when they lose arguments.
Was that a rare thing back then?
To be thrown out?
Blind people? No, to have blind people?
No, the blindness was rampant in that in the ancient world. Yeah.
So kind of rare?
No, it was very common. All right, let me get through this last section. I got 4 minutes and 6 verses. We can do it. All right. Jesus heard that they had cast him out. Jesus heard that they cast the man out. And having found him, he said, "Do you believe in the Son of Man?" He answered, "And who is he, sir, that I may believe in him?" So what you see here is that he doesn't know who Jesus is really. He knows his name is Jesus, but he doesn't know who Jesus really is. But he is ready to believe. His heart has been quickened by the Spirit, and he is open to that. He just doesn't know where to point his new faith yet. Jesus said to him, "You have seen him, and it is he who speaks to you." So once he reveals himself to be the Son of Man, he said to him, "Lord, I believe," and he worshiped him. He doesn't, this worship thing, he literally goes instantly into the worship of God, Jesus. He is the Son of Man. He is the Messiah. He is God. He realizes that. His physical eyes had been opened, and now his spiritual eyes are fully opened, and now he sees Christ for who he really is. Jesus said, "For judgment I came into this world, that those who do not see may see, and those who see may become blind." He's not saying that the Pharisees had been able to see and now become blind. It's that they thought they could see and they really couldn't. This is spiritual. He's not talking about physical sight here. He came into the world to judge. He also says he didn't come into the world to judge. What does he mean by saying the opposite here? He's referring to something specific. He's saying when he comes into the world and he presents evidence and truth, those who have eyes to see will see him, and those who don't will not. And that is the judgment. Their response is their judgment. Some of the Pharisees near him heard these things and said to him, "Are we also blind?" They're denying. Oh, this is a mocking. Oh, really? So we're the blind ones, right? And their arrogance, of course, they can't imagine. Jesus said to them, "If you were blind, you would have no guilt. But now that you say, 'We see,' your guilt remains." Your arrogance. It's like when we're told not to judge. Why are we told not to judge? Because in judging evil, we've acknowledged we know the difference, and now we are held accountable for evil. If I don't know what something is wrong, I'm driving 55 and don't realize it's 35, I'm not willfully sinning. But as soon as I see the sign, and then I keep going, you see what I'm saying? That's what he's saying here. There's this willfulness to their blindness. Main takeaway for you this morning, hopefully you'll have one. I just come back to this verse. I have told you already, you would not listen. You want to hear it again. It's this idea that the truth will set you free. In what way will the truth set you free? Don't let others hostile disbelief affect your passion for Jesus? That's kind of the way I say that there. Yeah, you will have hostile disbelief that you will run into in your life a lot. Don't back down in the face of that. Be bold like this man was. Go ahead, Frida.
I think that as we admit to the truth and light that God has shown us,
Yes.
He gives us more light and more truth.
Mhm.
Because this man, said, well, this is what I do know,
Yep.
and God gave him more
Yes.
truth later.
We see that, yeah.
This is, I am Jesus.
Yep.
And then he said, well,
Yes.
Lord Jesus, I'm going to own you as my Lord.
And what's interesting is when you have truth that you don't respond to, and then you have more truth that you don't respond to, what you're doing is you're kind of digging your hole deeper and deeper, right? I do believe there are degrees of punishment in hell and degrees of joy in heaven. I think that's, if you don't understand why I'm saying that, come see me after and I'll explain further, but I don't have time to give you a long explanation. The point is, it will be worse for you, Capernaum, than it will be for Sodom and Gomorrah on the day of judgment. Why? Because you were exposed to the living Son of God doing miracles right in your midst and you still rejected. That's what these guys are doing. They're just building up their punishments in heaven. Or in hell, sorry. Heaven, hell. All right, let me pray so we're not...
My main takeaway is
Go ahead.
agree to disagree.
Okay. I would
I
say...
don't agree with your opinion about blah, 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 and you don't agree with my opinion about blah, blah, blah. But what do they say? We can agree to disagree.
Agree to disagree. The thing about that is you want to do that at times, but you also want to push through and continue to try to help them understand the truth. If it's a topic like politics, agree to disagree and move on. That's fine. But on an issue like
You're not gonna
salvation,
change- You're not going to change your opinion, you're not going to change their opinion.
yeah. Let me pray and we'll get out of here. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for the morning. Thank you for your word. This great story just demonstrates, Jesus, your compassion and love. Despite the stones in the hands of the leaders that were after you, you paused and took time to care for this man, utterly change his not just life but his eternity. Lord, help us to have the same kind of boldness that this man has. Help us to be willing to stand tall in the face of defiant disbelief. Help us to do that. Help us to continue to learn more and more about you and your character as we continue to work through this book of John and continue to learn as we move forward. Let's pray all these things in Jesus' name. Amen.